Prologue. In the shadowed hills of rural Pennsylvania, there exists a forgotten town called Foxwood. Once a thriving boomtown on a 19th century coal seam, it is now a cluster of sagging roofs and rotting clapboard houses, strangled by vines and left to the mercy of time. Locals stay away from Foxwood. They say the place is cursed, that people who wander there become haunted by whispers in the trees and shadows that move of their own accord. The state never bothered to demolish it, choosing instead to let the forest reclaim what remained. The town slowly sank back into the earth, its only visitors now thrill-seeking teenagers and urban explorers hoping for a brush with the uncanny. On a mild autumn afternoon, 21-year-old Riley Carter turned off the main highway and steered their car up a narrow gravel road. They were a history major at a small college in Philadelphia with a passion for folklore and old ghost stories. When they found an obscure reference to a damned hollow in a faded library book, Foxwood's name jumped out like a warning written in invisible ink. The place had been abandoned when a mine collapse in 1896 claimed dozens of lives. Some said it was an accident. Others whispered about something older and far darker, living deep underground. Whatever the truth, the tragedy left a stain that never washed away. Riley wasn't the type to scare easily. They considered themselves rational, grounded in research and documentation. But there was something else driving them to Foxwood, an invitation tucked between the pages of an old journal. The journal belonged to Eliora Finch, a schoolteacher who survived the collapse and chronicled the town's last days before the exodus. At the very end, Eliora had written, "If you find this, go to Foxwood at the beginning of October and listen at the well in the town square. When the wind is right, you will hear the truth." Eliora signed it and left behind directions that led Riley on the 4-hour drive into the mountains. Chapter 1. The Town That Was. Riley's GPS pinched out the last of the map as they eased over a barely visible path marked by a rusting sign that read, "Foxwood, no trespassing, danger." They slowed to a crawl as their car bumped over exposed roots and weeds that had swallowed the road. Their heart pounded, not from fear, but from anticipation. The smell of damp leaves and distant firewood flooded the car through the cracked windows. Foxwood appeared like a phantom between the trees. There were sagging porches, broken glass panes, and brick chimneys leaning at precarious angles. Ivy crawled up the sides of once proud Victorians. An old church steeple jutted above the canopy, its cross askew, pointing not to heaven, but to the forest behind it. The silence pressed in on Riley's ears. Even birdsong seemed absent. They parked near the remnants of the town square, a flattened area where a hand-dug well still stood like a sentinel. Its stones were slick with moss. A wooden sign leaned against it. The words, "Don't listen," carved deep by someone with a sense of humor or a warning to travelers. Riley grabbed their backpack, stuffed with notebooks, a camera, and Eliora's journal, and approached the well. They peered down. The darkness within seemed bottomless, swallowing the pale sunlight that tried to reach it. They felt a slight breeze rising from the depths, carrying the scent of cold earth and something metallic. Riley shivered, telling themselves it was the temperature drop. They sat on the edge and waited, listening as leaves rustled overhead. Minutes stretched into an hour. Doubt crept in. Had they been tricked by a woman dead for over a century? Was this all a wild goose chase, fueled by romantic notions of haunted towns and hidden truths? Just as they decided to call it a day, A whisper curled up from the well. It was faint at first, more a vibration than a sound. Riley leaned closer, heart pounding. The whisper grew, becoming words in a voice that wasn't the wind. "You shouldn't have come here." Chapter 2. The Voice Below. Riley jerked back from the well, nearly losing their balance. For a few long seconds, they thought someone must be hiding nearby, playing a prank. They scanned the square, but the town remained empty. The whispering continued, now clear and unmistakable. "You hear us because she called you. You have her book." Riley steadied themselves. "Who are you?" they asked, their voice sounding too loud in the stillness. There was a low, hollow laugh. "We are what remains. We are the ones who never left." The voice seemed to come from all directions at once. Riley's rational mind wrestled with possibilities. Was there a network of tunnels carrying voices? Could someone be down there? They lifted their camera and pressed the record button, focusing on the dark opening. "I'm Riley," they said, as if introductions mattered. "I read Eliora Finch's journal. She said there was a truth here." The air grew colder. Riley could see their breath in puffs. The voice replied, "Eliora came to us. She saw us when the mind swallowed them. She knew the hollow was not a hole, but a mouth." Images flashed in Riley's mind. Men and boys trapped underground, their lanterns snuffed out by falling rock, their screams swallowed by the earth. Elira had been there, not in the mine, but near it, and she wrote of hearing those cries when she slept. "What mouth?" Riley asked. "Who are you really?" "We are hungry," the voice said. "We wait. We listened to her, and she listened to us. Now you have come, and you will not leave as you arrived." Riley's instincts screamed at them to run, but curiosity rooted them in place. They should have left then. The sun was sinking, casting long shadows over the square. As the light faded, the voices in the well multiplied, like a chorus rising from deep underground. Some wept, some begged, others laughed. Eliora's words returned to Riley's mind. "Listen at the well in the town square when the wind is right." But listening had become something else entirely. Chapter 3. Nightfall. When the first shriek echoed out of the well, raw and piercing, Riley snapped out of their trance. They scrambled away, stumbled to their car, and shoved the key into the ignition. The engine whined. Dead battery. Riley cursed, fumbling with their phone to call for help, but the screen had no signal. Panic threatened to overtake them. They had told no one exactly where they were going. Their mind conjured headlines. Student found dead in abandoned Pennsylvania town. The voices from the well rose in volume, a cacophony of cries and whispers weaving together in something like a chant. As darkness fell fully, a thick fog crept into the square, snaking between broken fences and sagging doorways. Riley could not see more than a few feet ahead. The fog carried with it a damp cold that sunk into their bones. They rummaged through the glove compartment for a flashlight and flicked it on. Its beam cut a small tunnel through the mist. Shapes moved at the edge of the light, shadows that seemed to detach from the decaying houses and slip closer. Riley's breath quickened. They shone the beam toward the well. For a moment, they saw faces leaning over the edge, pale and gaunt, eyes like twin voids. When they blinked, the faces were gone. The fog thickened. A high, keening wail rolled over the square, like wind squeezing through a narrow crack. Riley pressed the heel of their hand against their forehead, trying to steady themselves. Then they heard footsteps crunching on gravel behind them. "Hello," Riley called, spinning around with the flashlight. The beam fell on a figure standing 10 feet away. It was a woman. Her clothes late 19th century. A long black dress covered by a shawl. Her hair was piled in a neat bun, though it seemed more like a shadow than hair. Her face was pale, with eyes too wide and dark. "Eleora?" Riley asked on impulse. The woman's mouth curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You should not have listened," she whispered. "They will want more now." Riley took a step back. "Who are you? Are you real?" The woman tilted her head. "Real? Once. Now I am what happens when truth is ignored. Come with me before it's too late." Without waiting for an answer, she turned and glided toward the church. Riley hesitated for only a moment before following. The alternative, staying by the well with unseen voices and moving shadows, seemed worse. Chapter 4. The Church. The church was a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a steeple that rose crookedly into the fog. Its door hung open, creaking as the woman pushed it further. Inside, pews lay toppled, and broken stained glass littered the floor. A layer of dust coated everything. Despite the decay, candles along the walls burned with a steady blue flame, casting an eerie light. The woman walked to the front and stood before a pulpit that had collapsed long ago. She turned to face Riley. "You hold Eleora's journal?" she asked. "Yes," Riley said, pulling it from their backpack. "Open it to the last entry." Riley flipped to the final pages. Elira's handwriting became shaky near the end. The last page contained the note inviting any future reader to the well. Riley looked up. Why did she write that? "Because she made a pact," the woman said. "The hollow demanded something to replace what it had lost. It needed to be fed. She promised that someone would come, someone curious enough to listen. That someone is you." Riley's mouth went dry. "A pact? Replace what?" The woman stepped closer, her form wavering slightly, as if made of smoke. The mine did not collapse by chance. The men broke through into something ancient. They thought they found a cavern full of quartz. In truth, they cracked open an entrance to the hollow, a space between our world and somewhere else. Whatever lives there is hungry. It took the miners and would have taken the town. But Eleora bargained. If she could bring it curious listeners and believe there would always be new ears to feed on, it would not devour everyone. Riley stared. It sounded like the plot of a horror movie, not the confession of a long-dead schoolteacher. "Why me?" "Because you were willing to listen," the woman said simply. "Now the hollow knows your name." Riley's throat tightened. "Can I leave? If I go, will it follow?" The woman's smile faded. "It will. You are bound. But there is one way. You must make your own bargain." Chapter 5. Bargains and Shadows. "What kind of bargain?" Riley asked, voice trembling. "The same kind Eleora made," the woman replied. "You must promise the hollow something in exchange for your life. Otherwise, it will drag you into the space between when you leave these woods. It does not care for roads or miles. Once you have heard its call, distance means nothing." Riley felt dizziness wash over them. Everything logical in their mind recoiled at the idea of bargaining with a supernatural entity. But the voices, the well, the fog, those were real, or felt real enough. They looked around the church at the candles burning with unnatural flames. "What did Eleora promise?" The woman's eyes darkened. "She promised to send someone like you every 30 years. She kept her promise until she died. Others after her continued it. But lately, no one came. It grew impatient. It reached out. It is hungrier now. Riley's stomach churned. If Eleonora had been writing at the end of the 19th century, 30 years would have passed multiple times. Was it possible that over 100 years, others had stumbled into Foxwood, lured by whispers? How many had left unharmed after making a bargain? How many had disappeared? The woman continued. You could promise it something smaller, a piece of yourself, a memory. It feeds on attention, on remembrance. People have promised it secrets, names, songs they never sing aloud. It grows stronger with each promise. Riley gripped the journal until their knuckles went white. Give the hollow a memory? A secret? The idea was terrifying. But the alternative, being dragged into some void, was worse. If I promise it something now, can I leave? Will it let me go? The woman nodded slowly. It will. It is bound by its own rules, as we are by ours. Riley took a deep breath. What if I refuse? The woman did not answer. Her form flickered like a candle in the wind. Riley sensed that she was fading, tethered to this church by something fragile. You cannot stay here, she whispered finally. Choose quickly. Chapter 6. The Promise. Riley's mind raced. What could they give up? A memory? A secret? Something that would feed an ancient hunger, but leave them intact. They closed their eyes and thought of their childhood. Summers at the beach with their parents. The smell of sunscreen and salt. Their grandmother's kitchen, warm with baking cookies. Nights studying under flickering desk lamps in the library. Each memory felt precious. Could they sacrifice something trivial? Their locker combination from high school? A song they learned as a child but hadn't sung in years? Would that satisfy the hollow? They doubted it. Then an idea came, dark and heavy. Their fear itself. Fear had taken many forms in their life. Fear of failing classes, fear of disappointing family, fear of being alone. It had driven them to study hard, to stay safe, to seek stability. What if they offered the hollow the memory of their greatest fear? Would they then live without that burden? It seemed tempting. Riley opened their eyes. If I give the hollow something intangible, they said slowly. Does it matter what it is? It matters to you, the woman said. It will take what you promise. You will live without that part of you. Choose wisely. The idea of losing a fear made Riley feel both relieved and uneasy. Fear served a purpose. Without fear, would they act recklessly? They could choose a memory instead, a specific afternoon, or a favorite book. But memories anchored who they were. Losing one might unravel subtle threads they did not see. Riley swallowed hard. They decided to give up the memory of their first heartbreak. It had been painful, consuming them for months. But it was also part of their growth. Without it, they might forget why they were cautious in love. Was that a price worth paying? Yet they reasoned that forgetting that pain might not change the lesson. The emptiness could be filled with something new. They doubted the hollow would be satisfied with something so personal but meaningless to others. It sought raw emotions, not trivial facts. Finally, Riley whispered, I offer the hollow the memory of the day my childhood dog died. The woman's eyes widened. You would give that? Riley nodded, tears stinging. It had been one of the worst days of their life. Losing their dog, Milo, had been their first encounter with death. The hollow could feed on that grief, that rawness. Riley had carried it for years. Maybe letting it go would bring peace. The woman lifted her hand and pointed toward the church door. "Go to the well. Speak your promise aloud. It will hear. Do not tarry." Chapter 7. Offering. Outside, the fog had thinned slightly but still hung low. The voices from the well had quieted, as if waiting. Riley approached the edge, their heart hammering. They gripped the stone rim and leaned over just enough to see the darkness swirling below. "I know you can hear me," Riley said, their voice shaking. "I came because Eliora wrote to me. I listened, and now I am offering something so I can leave." The air grew colder. A rumble deep within the well vibrated through the stone. "What do you offer?" the hollow's voice whispered, more inside Riley's head than outside. Riley closed their eyes. "I offer you the memory of the day Milo died. The pain I felt. The smell of the vet's office. The feeling of holding him while he took his last breath. I offer you my grief." A suction feeling tugged at Riley's chest. It was like wind being pulled through them. Their lungs emptied and filled again. For a second, their vision blurred. Then, abruptly, the sensation stopped. Warmth returned. "We take it," the hollow hissed. "You may leave for now. But remember, promises bind. In 30 years, we will call again." Riley sank to their knees, breathless. They felt light, as if something heavy had been lifted. They tried to recall Milo's death, but it was as if that day had been covered by a thin, translucent veil. They could remember owning a dog. They could picture Milo's wagging tail, his soft ears. But the day he died was gone, replaced by blankness. It was unsettling and relieving all at once. Chapter 8. Leaving Foxwood. As Riley backed away from the well, the fog continued to recede. The voices faded into distant whispers. They hurried to their car and tried the ignition again. This time, the engine roared to life as if nothing had been wrong. They turned the car around, avoiding the crumbling fountain and cracked sidewalks, and drove back down the overgrown road. At the tree line, they glanced in the rearview mirror. The town seemed farther away than it should, the square a blur of shadow. Riley saw the figure of the woman, Eliora, the unnamed apparition, standing at the edge of the square, watching. Then Foxwood disappeared behind the trees. Back on the highway, the world felt bright and loud. Cars whizzed by. The radio played a cheerful pop song. For a moment, Riley doubted everything they'd experienced. Had they imagined Foxwood's voices? Had they hallucinated the woman in the church? But when they tried to recall Milo's death, the memory remained out of reach, like a word on the tip of their tongue. A part of them had been taken. That much was real. Riley returned to Philadelphia and tried to resume their life. They attended classes, met friends, and worked on assignments. Days passed, then weeks. Sometimes they woke in the middle of the night to whispers at the edge of their hearing. They would turn on the lights and pace their apartment until the whispers faded. They started having vivid dreams of underground tunnels full of humming crystals and endless darkness. In the dreams, a voice asked for names, memories, songs, anything to fill the void. They avoided talking about Foxwood to anyone. When a professor assigned a paper on regional folklore, Riley considered writing about Foxwood, but decided against it. Some things were better left buried. Chapter 9. 30 years later. Time has a way of erasing sharp edges. Decades passed. Riley graduated, built a career, moved to different cities, loved and lost, and eventually settled in a quiet suburb of Boston. They married and had a daughter named Harper. Foxwood became a strange memory, something they occasionally doubted ever happened. The missing memory of Milo's death remained a subtle ache, like a scar you can feel, but not see. On a crisp October morning in 2026, Riley, now 51, sat on their porch drinking coffee, while Harper, 19, packed her car. She was heading to a university in Ohio to study literature. The day was full of pride and melancholy. Riley helped her load the last box, then hugged her fiercely. "Call me when you get there," Riley said, brushing a strand of hair from Harper's face. I will, Harper laughed. "I'm only going to Ohio, not across the ocean." As Harper drove away, Riley felt a familiar chill creep up their spine. The wind seemed to carry a whisper, a voice they hadn't heard in years. "We remember." Riley's coffee mug trembled in their hand. That night, as they lay in bed, they dreamt of Foxwood. They saw the well, the church, the woman with dark eyes. In the dream, the woman said, "It has been 30 years." Riley woke with a start. It had indeed been 30 years. They had forgotten the timeline until now. Their promise had an expiration date. The whispering grew louder over the next few days. It followed Riley to the grocery store, to work, to the backyard. Harper called, telling them about classes and friends, but Riley could barely focus. They knew what had to be done. Chapter 10. The Second Visit. Riley didn't tell anyone where they were going. They packed a bag with water, a flashlight, and Eliora's journal, which they had kept hidden for decades. The edges were worn, the pages yellowed. Driving out of Boston, they felt the weight of time pressing down. As the miles passed, the whispering in their head grew more insistent, urging them west, toward the Appalachian foothills. Foxwood looked different in daylight. Trees were taller, houses more collapsed. The church had finally given in to gravity. Its steeple lay on the ground. The well, however, looked unchanged, as if time did not touch it. Moss covered the stones, and the carved warning remained. Riley approached with a mix of dread and resignation. They peered down into the darkness once more. Immediately, a voice rose up. "You have come." "It's been 30 years, Riley said, their voice steady. "I kept my promise. I'm here." "And what do you bring us?" the hollow asked. Riley took a deep breath. Over the past few days, they had thought about what to offer. They considered sacrificing another painful memory, but those had become precious in their own right. Without them, they might become a different person. They thought of giving up a talent, perhaps their ability to play piano, which they rarely did. They thought of giving the hollow the memory of the day Harper was born, but that was unimaginable. Then they thought of Harper herself. They imagined how Eliora must have felt, promising to send someone else every 30 years. A chill ran through them. They could not betray their daughter. They refused to set that cycle in motion again. "I bring you something new," Riley said. "I offer you my fear of death. Take it." The hollow laughed, a sound like stones grinding. "You offer what you no longer need? You are closer to death now, but we will take it. You will walk without fear of what comes next." The same suction sensation tugged at Riley's chest. For a moment, they felt weightless. Then warmth returned. When it passed, the hollow said, "You may leave. But there must always be more. We will not be satisfied with promises that cost you little. Next time, we will call for more than a fear." Riley's jaw clenched. There won't be a next time. There will always be a next time, the hollow whispered. If not you, then someone you love. Chapter 11. breaking the cycle. Driving home, Riley's mind churned. The Hollow's words repeated, "Someone you love." They could not let it claim Harper or anyone else. The cycle had to end. But how do you destroy something that lives between worlds? Something that fed on memories, fears, attention? Riley recalled the woman's words. It is bound by its own rules. If the Hollow required promises and attention to grow stronger, perhaps starving it was the answer. Riley began to research ancient folklore, urban legends, and rituals involving similar entities. They found stories of creatures that thrived on names spoken aloud, on songs sung, on stories told. Denying them attention weakened them. That seemed obvious, yet Foxwood continued to exist in whispers, among locals, and in obscure books. Riley wondered if by simply reading Eliora's journal in the first place, they had fed it. The Hollow needed curious listeners. Without them, would it shrink? Would it sleep? They decided to hide Eliora's journal where no one would find it. They burned the directions and removed all references to Foxwood from their own notes. They broke into the archives of their college's library and stole the aged, brittle book that had first mentioned the damned Hollow. In the basement of their house, they built a fire and fed the books to the flames. Smoke coiled up, carrying with it the last of Foxwood's recorded history. After that night, the whispering grew fainter. Days passed without any eerie dreams. A month later, the voices disappeared entirely. Riley felt a strange emptiness without the constant background noise, but they also felt at peace. The Hollow had been cut off from new attention. Over time, perhaps it would fade. Epilogue. Years later, when Harper's own daughter, Lily, asked about family history for a school project, Riley told her about their grandmother and great-grandmother, about growing up in the city and moving to the suburbs. They did not mention Foxwood. The memory of the abandoned town remained locked in Riley's mind like a sealed jar. They could still picture the mossy stones of the well, the faces emerging from the fog, the woman in the black dress. They could still feel the absence where the grief for Milo should have been, and the calm indifference toward death after their second bargain. Those absences reminded them of the cost. They hoped that by burying Foxwood's story, they had saved future generations. They understood that horror did not always come from monsters with claws or ghosts that rattled chains. Sometimes it came from debts passed down unnoticed, from promises forced on the unsuspecting, from the idea that some hungers could never be sated. They realized that the scariest stories were not the ones told around campfires, but the ones whispered in wells, waiting for curious ears. In their final years, Riley would sometimes dream of walking through a forest in autumn, leaves crunching underfoot. They would come to a clearing where a town once stood. Sunlight would filter through bare branches, and there would be no fog, no voices, just the smell of damp earth and the soft coo of morning doves. In those dreams, the Hollow had grown quiet. Whether it slept or simply waited, Riley never knew. But when they woke, they felt gratitude for the silence,